Do you feel like you've been studying English for years, but you freeze the moment you have to speak? And then you see some people whose grammar or vocabulary may not be perfect, yet they can somehow speak with total confidence and ease. The difference isn't intelligence or how much effort you put in. A lot of the time, it's just habits. I remember how I studied English in high school in Taiwan. I wrote new vocabulary words repeatedly in my notebook to memorize the spelling. I did pages after pages of cloze activities to complete the sentences. I looked up the meanings of words I didn't know in Chinese and wrote them above the English words while I was reading an article. Doing these English exercises made me feel like I was very productive. Like I was studying hard, Yet, when a foreigner casually said, "Hey, how's it going?" all I could do was smile. These study habits have one thing in common. The learner is not speaking while doing them. And in order to improve speaking, one has to speak. These study habits are quietly keeping learners silent. So today, I want to talk about 3 habits that make speaking English feel harder than it has to be. And more importantly, we're going to talk about what to do instead, easily and realistically, not in a "you must study English for 8 hours a day" kind of way. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kate's Bite-Size English Podcast. Before we dive into today's topic, I just want to remind you that this podcast is a safe space, and you can use it however works best for your own learning style. If you just want to hit play, relax, and let the spoken English wash over you to get some more exposure, that's fantastic. If you want a bit more support, you can follow along with the transcript. Just keep in mind that the transcripts are AI generated, so they might contain a few mistakes here and there. And remember, you are the boss of your own learning. If I say something too fast, or if your mind wanders, feel free to pause, hit rewind, and listen to that section again whenever you need to. There are no rules here. Okay, let's talk about why so many people feel deeply frustrated with spoken English, even after spending a lot of time and money on lessons. It's not because the learners are lazy. In fact, Asian language learners are easily the hardest working learners. But many people are trapped in study habits that may feel productive but don't actually help with real-life communication. Compared to European or Latin American learners, whose approach to language learning is very often speak first, correct later, Asian learners want to sound natural immediately. They don't want awkward pauses. They don't want mistakes. They don't want to sound bad in English. So instead of using the language freely, they start overanalyzing every word before they even open their mouths. And the moment has passed. This is why in a multicultural language classroom, Asian students are usually the quiet ones. Today we're going to talk about 3 specific habits. 1. Waiting too long to speak. 2. Translating everything in your head. And 3. Being too afraid of mistakes. These 3 habits are deeply connected. They all come from a place of fear. But once you understand that, hopefully the weight lifts and English starts feeling a little bit lighter. Let's talk about waiting too long to speak. I think this is probably one of the biggest traps in language learning. A lot of learners secretly believe, I'll start speaking when I'm ready. But here's the truth. And your first major takeaway for today is that speaking is actually the thing that creates readiness. It is not the reward you get after becoming ready. Now, I completely understand why people wait. Speaking English feels vulnerable. When you write, you have time to edit. When you study grammar, there's actually a neat, clear answer. When you memorize vocabulary, it feels safe. But conversation? Conversation is messy. Sometimes your brain freezes. Sometimes you forget a basic word. Sometimes you say something a little strange and then replay it in your head for the rest of the day. Honestly, though, that happens to everybody. Even native speakers say awkward things and stumble over their words. Real communication has pauses, repetitions, self-correction, half-finished sentences, and moments where you suddenly stop and say, wait, how do I explain this? That is natural speech. So if speaking feels terrifying, start small. Try this instead. Describe what you're doing out loud for about 30 seconds while you're getting ready in the morning or getting your coffee. Or if you normally text someone, then try to text in English. Or even better, use the voice note instead. These tiny moments matter because your brain needs practice retrieving language in real time. Confidence usually comes after repeated action. Next, let's talk about translating everything in your head. Problem is that the translation creates massive lag. Think of it like your brain is opening too many browser tabs at once. You hear English, you translate it into your first language to understand it. You think of a response in your first language, then you try to translate that response back into English. By the time you finish that process, the conversation has already moved on. To close those extra tabs, one thing that helps immensely is learning English in chunks instead of isolated words. For example, don't just memorize the adjective awkward. Instead, learn the natural, ready-to-use patterns like this. Oh, that was awkward. This is so awkward. I'm feeling a bit awkward here. You see, when you learn chunks, you can just grab the whole pattern and throw it into conversation instantly. No translation required. In real life, conversation doesn't come from perfect word translation anyway. It comes from context, tone, facial expressions, and keywords working together. When you stop decoding and start reacting, everything changes. Now, we have arrived at the emotional core of everything. And I want to spend a little bit more time here because I think this is where most learners are silently suffering the most. A lot of people are not afraid of English itself. They are struggling with embarrassment. They're afraid that people will judge their accent, judge their grammar, or judge how long it takes for them to answer a simple question. And honestly, I deeply understand that fear, especially when we grew up in a strict school environment where a red pen marks every single error, where a wrong answer in front of the whole class felt humiliating, where the message, either spoken or unspoken, was that mistakes meant you simply are not good enough. A lot of us were taught to believe good English equals zero mistakes. And that belief follows us into adulthood, into conversations, into job interviews, into every moment where we have to open our mouths and something less than perfect comes out. But here's what I want you to really hear. That belief is a lie. Think about a child learning to walk. Nobody looks at a toddler falling down and says, wow, she's really bad at walking. We understand instinctively that falling is part of the process. So, how do you actually start breaking this habit of beating yourself up? Remember in the first episode, I shared that my favorite way to practice speaking Japanese is when I'm doing mundane housework? You could totally do that too. Talk to yourself in the car, in a shower, while you're cooking, while you're drying your hair. Just talk about your day like you are telling a friend about it. You're building muscle memory, both with your tongue and with your brain. You want to make the association that speaking English is just everyday, low stress, no big deal. Or you can record a private voice journal on your phone. Start small, one sentence. Then you could probably extend it. Talk about your day. What did you watch? What did you think about? Who did you talk to? How did you feel? You don't have to listen to it if it makes you anxious. The point is not for you to critique yourself. The point is to practice producing language without an audience. So the goal with all these activities is very simple. Repeated, low-stake exposure. Because fear doesn't go away by waiting for it to disappear. Fear shrinks when you face it in small, safe doses over and over again until your nervous system slowly learns, this is okay. I can do this. Every single mistake is a data point your brain is collecting and filing away to make it stronger. The learners who make the most mistakes in a short term are very often the ones who improve the most in the long term. Because they are in the game. They're getting the reps. They're doing the thing, even though it may seem so hard in the beginning. So next time you say something wrong, laugh at yourself first. Then take a breath, correct it if you can, let it go if you can't, and keep moving forward. That is what fluency actually looks like in real life. So today we looked at the 3 hidden habits that quietly keep so many English learners stuck. Waiting too long to speak, translating word for word in your head, and being overly afraid of mistakes. They all come from the exact same place. The very human desire to protect ourselves from discomfort and embarrassment. But language learning becomes so much lighter the moment you stop treating every everyday conversation like a test. You do not need perfect English to connect with people. You just need enough courage to show up and try. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Kate. A little English every day. That's how we do it.